Welcome to Hey Therapist. I'm your host, Leslie Ross. With me is my producer, J. Wesley Lindley. Let's get mental. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Hey Therapist. Today, I am joined by a very special guest who is also my sister and is here against her will. And I have brought her in because this month, the month of April, is National Child Abuse Prevention Month. I wanted to bring in someone who deals with those sorts of things, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So this is Laura Lindly. She is an attorney, but she also is a guardian ad litem. No?
Well,
is that right?
So it depends on the state you're in.
Okay.
And what kind of case it is. But
so you practice in Oklahoma and Arkansas?
Yes.
Primarily?
Yes.
So what is it called in Arkansas?
In Arkansas, I actually have a contract with the state of Arkansas because they have a little bit of different setup. And the attorneys that are appointed for children in DHS cases are attorney ad litems. Recently, the law has changed. Our job in those cases we're appointed to the kids. We represent their interest, their best interest, as well as if they're old enough, we represent to the court what they request as well, and we're their voice.
And what is old enough? What do the courts consider old enough?
It varies by child. You're going to have, basically, it looks at the maturity level of the child, kind of what their requests are. For example, you've got a 16-year-old that is being rebellious and makes a request to the court that they want to be emancipated. Then I would have to go to the court and say, Your Honor, my client would love to be emancipated. And then I would also say, but I do not feel it's in their best interest.
Ah, I see.
And so that's, and the law has kind of shifted more recently to where we have to be more of the attorney for them versus their best interest. So I would have to advocate for that a little bit. But if they can't meet the requirements of that, I would have to advise the court. This is what my client wants, but they're not ready
able to take care of themselves.
Exactly. They don't have a job. They don't have, yes, they can't get housing. In Oklahoma, there's a couple of different ways to do it. There's a guardian ad litem that's appointed in a divorce case. I represent kids in divorce cases sometimes. In that, we're guardian ad litems where we are appointed, and our role is to do an investigation, talk to parents, talk to the kids, give a report to the court as to what we feel not necessarily our recommendation would be, but just lay the facts out for the court as to this is what I investigated, this is what I found.
Right. These people can't get along, and they're using their children as pawns.
A lot of times, yes. Yes. And then there's the DHS side of it where we're appointed as the attorney for the child in that one, and we just do best interest in Oklahoma for the most part.
What do you think the most common things are that you run into when it comes to abuse, or it comes to the children not being cared for, or being, again, it's abusive for parents to use their children as pawns. Children are not pawns in a game. They are children. But what do you think you see the most that you have to advocate for or against?
In our area, because I've only practiced in our area, which is, like you said, I'm Oklahoma and Arkansas. So I know you've described where we live before on your podcast. So we're in the corner by Oklahoma, Arkansas, and we are considered a poverty area and have been designated that at one time by the president and others. Where we are, meth is a huge issue. And with meth comes neglect more than anything. Typically, I see horrendous cases. I've been doing this for, I think this is my 27th year this year, 26 or 27 years. I know. I've had my contract in Arkansas for over 10 years now. So I know awesome. I've been doing it for a while. But you see a lot of neglect, neglect can be anything. It can be dirty house. We see nasty house a lot. People on meth tend not to remember to, clean.
Right.
Or
themselves, much less their house.
And they also don't notice that there's, an abundance of roaches living with them. Like that. Joe.
Oh,
yeah, like that movie.
The scariest movie ever.
It'll just be disgusting. Dog feces and cat feces are a huge thing in the really bad meth houses. And people with meth are very fertile, it seems, because they'll have 2 or 3 kids,
Yes.
have a couple that's been taken away and they just keep trying,
Sure.
I guess, to keep one. I don't know what that theory is. A lot of times they have toddlers on the floor in the feces.
Sure.
And the food that they're feeding the toddlers is molded, if there's any food. And unfortunately for those kids, because it was, did you say Prevention Month? Mm-hmm. So I think it used to be awareness.
It used to be awareness, yes.
So I like that it's now prevention instead of awareness, because everybody's aware that kids are being abused.
Right.
I mean,
Verbiage is important. The words you use.
Even if you're a person that doesn't have kids or kids in school or deal with children, you see children and you watch TV, and TV has all
Right.
those abuse cases. And now
Sure.
they have the reality shows where it shows, what has happened to people.
Sure.
Prevention is a much better thing, because then the people that are aware that this is going on could possibly report. So that is where our meth babies and meth toddlers kind of get neglected, is that people don't see them. So you get a lot of that. I've had from the most horrible, where I've had dead babies, to the ones that have to be in children's hospital because they're not being cared for.
Sure.
Those kids don't, unless someone comes in the home for something else.
Right.
Which I've had happen, where they came in for hospice on a grandparent and saw that there was a toddler that's been in a playpen and it's 2 years old, and there's chew marks around the playpen because they're not ever getting to get out of the playpen. And they're, so those people are eyes on. When they reach school age, it's a lot easier.
Sure.
Because teachers see them coming to school starving.
Right.
And dirty. And, they'll have the bite marks on them because they'll play outside forever, or they're left outside forever. And so the teachers become aware and know what's going on in the home and can report, because they are mandatory reporters. They should report. If they're not, they should. So I think that neglect is one of the biggest ones.
Yeah. And I think that's a good point too, that you talk about that, there's a lot of the unseen because they're so small, there's no one else involved, or the whole family is on meth, or they don't want to report because maybe their kids were taken away and it was a bad deal. People are afraid to report sometimes.
Yes.
Because they don't want the repercussions. In Oklahoma, you can now anonymously report. So you may put your name on it, but they're not going to report who reported it. In the past, you could find out who reported you, but now there is an anonymous system for, and I know we're talking about children, but for adults as well. If APS, Adult Protective Services, ever need to be involved, you can report anonymously online. You don't have to put any of your information in there. But I know prior, family members may know something's going on, but they don't want to report because they don't want the kids just taken away. And a lot of times people don't understand that placement would first go most likely to family.
Yes. If family is an option, family is by DHS standards first. Like you may not also, grandma, grandpa that raised the parents that are now in DHS cases, a lot of times have a history.
Sure.
Because it is generational and it is learned. And if they don't break that cycle and learn better, they continue it. And that's mostly the nasty houses. Not all nasty houses are based on meth.
Right.
I've had some cases where people don't know any better.
Right. For sure.
They grew up in it. They grew up that this is just how you live. And, mama was a hoarder. So here we are in this big nasty house, but we've got a toddler in it and it becomes a safety hazard.
Sure.
But yeah, family's always first. And you can branch on out until you find a cousin or an uncle or an aunt that has a house that's adequate and can take them. And as long as they can pass the background checks and they don't have any kind of felony or DHS history, then they can be considered for placement.
Right. And I think people also don't understand that you don't have to have a perfect household to have placement. Like a dirty house, if you just have some things around or you're not the best housekeeper, your kids probably aren't going to get taken away for that. They may make a safety plan. There's a threshold, but we're talking about the filthy, nasty, like you said earlier, the bugs and the feces and the stacks of things that could fall onto your toddler when they're trying to pull up and crush them or severely injure them. It's people feel like if CPS comes to my house or DHS or one of those agencies come, they're going to take my kids. Maybe. But also they may just create a safety plan. They may create some parenting things. You may be put in classes. You may just need those resources that they never had. Because we deal with a lot of that at the agency that I work at in my real life. We get people that have said, DHS wants us to take some parenting classes, or they want the kids to be in therapy. And maybe it is the family that has now taken some guardianship or custody of the children that want to make sure the kids learn different behaviors.
And that is another thing. And just like anything, there are bad DHS.
Sure.
Over my years, I have worked with great ones, and I have worked with some that were not good at their job at all. And they moved on to do other things, luckily. But their first, over the years, it has transitioned. Initially, back in the day, they took the kids and they placed them somewhere, and then the parents had to work a plan. Now the goal is, first, if it can be done safely, they will not remove. Now you may have to, if it's, there's a difference between clutter and nast.
Yes.
Like clutter, everybody's got clutter.
Sure.
Well, not everybody. There are those people that are super clean, but
that's a whole other mental health issue.
Yeah. Most people have, the stack of laundry in an appropriate area that's not been done. The clean ones that are stacked somewhere different. This is, when I say nasty, these are houses that I don't know. Props to my DHS investigators that I work with, because they go in some houses that look like are off a scary movie, and they're roaches dropping from the ceiling style. It's nasty. Those are the homes kids can't safely stay in because you have a health risk to a toddler. Now, if it's a teenager and they can clean it up enough, the health risk is different for a teenager versus a toddler.
Right.
And the teenagers usually are old enough they could be helping, and they just have to learn those skills. Like you said, they have to be trained. This is not okay. This is not normal.
Right.
But they work on first non-removal if it can safely be done. And if it can't, then they remove to, like you said, a safety plan. If let's say there's a grandma and grandpa that can take the kids, they will do a safety plan, not even necessarily open a court case.
Right.
And if the parents follow along, they do everything, they get everything straightened up, the kids go back home with them, court never gets involved. It's those parents that don't want to change and take the attitude that the government's DHS hates me and they're just horrible,
they're picking on
and
me.
They're the enemy.
This is my fourth kid that they're investigating.
But
they're picking on me.
Yeah, they're the enemy. They're the enemy, and they tell their kids that, and it creates a whole cycle of just hard to deal with. But if they work the services, and if they have a bad worker, they all are appointed attorneys. If it gets to court, and if they truly have a rift with the worker, they can get a different one.
Right.
But just because they tell you to do something and you don't do it, you don't get to say, I want a different worker.
Right.
But all the agencies will work with them. They've got services. They utilize you guys. And anybody they can utilize, they want the parents to get help. And there's an agency called CASA, Love My CASA, that I deal with. They're court-appointed special advocates. They're another tool that the courts can use that come in. They get appointed in cases. They're volunteers. A lot of them are retired teachers, other people that have worked with kids before and they retired. It just tends to be older.
Sure.
I have some younger ones, but a lot of times it's people that have free time to do this because it is volunteer. I've had to have a talk with some of them we're looking for C, maybe a D plus C. We're not looking for A, because they'll come to me and they'll be like, that house, it had, it was cleanish, but it had, and I'll have to say, and that's not going to be like your house because they weren't raised in a house like your house. They were raised in a house worse than theirs. They're trying to be better. It's all on a scale. You've got to kind of take it with what they've got to work with too.
For sure. Because like you said, a lot of people don't know any better. And once they're learning, they may not have the resources. They may not be working a job that they can go buy new furniture, or they can go and replace this or make repairs to their home that is needed. So they have to depend on volunteer services or, some of those. I know there's a lot of churches and other areas for sure have a lot more resources than we do. And I think that does limit what some of our individuals can do, because they may just need, electric fixed or something like that, but they can't afford to pay for that. And we do have some agencies, some community resources in our area, but it's not like being in a metro area. So it is much harder for some people who are actually trying to get on track. And I think that's one of the things that is important to denote is if they are trying, then they get the leniency, they get a little more help, they're going to get a little more time. But if they're just saying F you to the system, screw you guys, you can't take my kids, I'll take them and hide somewhere and run off to a family member's house and all of those things. Like, that's not going to help you in any of these investigations.
Not at all. And like you said, some of them, they live... Old trailer houses are the worst. And like we talked about, this is not we
have a lot of them.
There's a lot of poverty. And when you're, you've used drugs, you can't hold your job.
Right.
And then they want you, that's the other thing that's kind of hard for families going through this system that where they get frustrated is they want you taking all these classes and doing rehab and doing all these things. And you can't hold a job and do those.
Right.
So we've been lucky that the court's really good to work with them on, like you said, giving them time if they're trying.
If they're trying.
If they're just, they're no shows, they get kicked out of counseling because they've missed 3 sessions in a row with no excuse.
Right.
Or no legitimate excuse.
No legitimate excuse.
It seems like right before the day they're supposed to be in court, everybody's got a job interview or a flat tire.
It's amazing.
It's crazy how that always happens. But if they're working, there are always people to help them.
Yeah.
Always people want to help them.
And I think that's the important part. And that's why I thought, it's one of those things I want to touch on for sure, is talking about, the prevention of it. And throughout this month, that's probably some of the topics we're going to talk about, is what child abuse looks like and what things are actually abusive. And I've talked about, some of the toxic things that families do and parents do, even the ones that are trying, the ones that DHS are never involved in, that these kids live in abuse, but they don't understand that it's abuse until they get older, or they go over to someone's house and go, oh, that's not normal. That's not how parents live. That's not, well, my house doesn't look like this. And then they're embarrassed to have friends over, or they're suffering from abuse. Maybe there was a divorce and parents didn't do what they needed to do, and then they got with abusive people. And now the child is being abused by a new spouse, and the actual parent is doing nothing about it because they don't want to get them in trouble, and they're, this is their spouse that they chose, or they just don't believe the kid. And that's
worse.
There's a lot of children who do tell lies. I mean, kids are notorious for, making things up and stuff like that. But if a kid tells you something is going on, believe them, because then the investigation happens. And if you have nothing to hide, when CPS or DHS shows up at your house, you're going to say, come on in. Like, listen, this is what I'm struggling with, and I am, working with my kid. And this has shown me that I really need to probably get more help for my kiddo because apparently they're struggling with something. But if you have nothing to hide, then it doesn't matter. As a therapist, I've always been a mandatory reporter. And I know you are as well. Teachers are. Medical professionals are. Law enforcement are. It's one of those things that I usually will tell a client if a kiddo, when I worked with kids, if they told me something, I would tell the parent, listen, they've disclosed this to me, and we would have a discussion about it. They may deny it, they may not, but I was like, but I have to report this. And they say, well, they're just saying that because I took away their Xbox. Maybe. It's possible, because sometimes kids do figure that out, or they have a friend and they'll be like, well, I'm going to tell you're abusing me. And the abuse is you took away my Xbox. Like, there are kids that think that way because they don't know what real abuse is, which is good. It's great. However, and I would always tell them, if nothing is going on, then that's going to come out. Like, let the investigation come. When they show up at your door, open the door for them. You don't say, well, this isn't true, and then get mad. And I mean, I've been, fired off of clients because I've reported them, and I don't care. Like, I'm not, if ever in doubt, I'm going to report it. And I know that you're the same. Like, if there's ever a question, if anything makes my little senses go up, I'm going to report it. And again, if there is nothing happening, it'll come out in the investigation. It'll come out in the questions that they do, the reporting, all of those things. If a kid tells you something has happened, believe them, because you may be the only one they tell. And if they trust you enough and you say, oh, I bet it wasn't that bad, or I don't know that would happen. Your mama, your daddy, your uncle, brother, cousin is so sweet. They would never do that to you. They never did anything to me. Why would they do anything to you? Well, if that kiddo is telling you that, they probably have. And now that you have dismissed them, they will never tell anyone else, and they will struggle with that, and they will take that on. And kid brains are selfish, and it's going to be turned into, it's my fault. I'm unlovable. I'm unworthy. I'm not good enough. Whatever it is that's creating this person to abuse me is my fault now, because it has to be, because nobody believes me. I guess this is just what we do. I just suffer through this abuse, and they may not ever report it. I always say people in therapy are in therapy because of people that needed therapy. Like, most kids don't end up, like most adults don't end up in therapy because they had this wonderful childhood or adulthood or whatever. It's probably someone who needed therapy, who needed to work on their shit, didn't. And now they have put that onto the kiddo. And I know you see that a lot in the courts, where it is that generational, it is that poverty thinking, that abusive thinking, the spare the rod, spoil the child theory. But they're beating their children. It's not like they're just giving them a little swat on the bottom. They're doing it with, a dipstick out of a vehicle or an antenna or whatever they can get their hands on. Bed slat.
Belts should not be utilized in spanking, because DHS frowns on that as well.
Well, I do too.
Contrary to what I have parents argue, well, that's how I got it. Well, it may have been how you got it, but you didn't like it either.
And look at you now.
Yeah.
And here we are in a court case.
There are approved physical disciplines out there, but that's something you should probably check into before you just go ham on your child.
Sure. And if you are going to use one of the approved utility devices, if you will, you use them in the approved places.
Like hand on the bottom, always a safe call if you're not overly aggressive leaving handprints.
Right.
Because if you're in a divorce case, guarantee I'm going to see a photo of that handprint if I'm appointed that case, because I see it all the time.
When people are using their children as pawns, they are getting them for visitations, and they are stripping them down, and they are checking them, and they are taking pictures,
nothing
and they're writing down everything, and they're questioning their kid, and it's just terrible. Do not do that to your children. Let your kids be kids.
Leave your kids out of it.
They should not be involved in adult things.
And if you're in a custody case, most states, I know Oklahoma and Arkansas both have where attorneys can be appointed in divorce cases to advocate for the child. And what that does is it takes the kid out of the middle of it and lets someone else be in the middle of it for them.
Sure.
So in those, like, I talk to both parents, I talk to the child, and if the child discloses some kind of abuse, I address it with the attorneys for the parents and say, I need something in place where this person's not around this child when they're with the parent. It's usually new boyfriend, new girlfriend, or whatever. And I know going back to the reporting part, a lot of your mandatory reporters do not report because they think it's not that big a deal.
Right.
They think, oh, well, this is just this is a once off. Like, if it's happened once, there is a good chance it's happened or will happen again. And that is where you call in, because then they have the people that are trained to interview children come in, interview the kids, and the kids can say, well, only when this happens, only when so-and-so drinks a lot do they do this, or only when this happens does this happen. But that's what the investigations are for, is to intervene. And that's, like you said, you may be their only safety option. I have a horrible case that has been going for a long time now, but it's physical. It was sexual abuse on the daughter by the dad. Mom absolutely says the child's confused and tells her, and it came to the point where the judge threatened to put her in jail because he said, if you one more time try to tell this child she's confused, I'm putting you in jail for contempt. And she has never wavered from her story that this happened to her. It happened to her by her dad and her brother. She reported to a teacher that she trusted, that she had been in class with. And that teacher, luckily, mandatory reported and got it rolling and got her out of that situation. But if, like you said, if someone said, well, I know them, that probably didn't happen.
That doesn't sound right.
Then she could have been in that cycle forever. Right. And those cycles don't end in those homes. So
no, they don't.
And they're the worst cases. I hate them. I hate those cases. But that is where my role is to step in and help this child not go back into that cycle.
Right.
And learn that that's not okay.
And learn that that's not,
Yeah.
Because most perpetrators of sexual abuse have been sexually abused. So if you have an adult or a child that's perpetrating on another sibling or other children, then someone did that. They don't just one day as a child wake up with these sexual urges and start touching people inappropriately or touching themselves inappropriately, showing themselves, doing that stuff. Someone has done that to them. And so if you are seeing that, I mean, it's 99.9% of the time someone is perpetrated on that child. You have to figure out who that is. If that teacher would have said, oh, well, you know, I bet she's the family, or maybe, well, other people know about this, because that's one of the things that I've ran into in you know, staffing and other things where, you know, maybe the child disclosed to one of the other workers that I worked with, but I may have been doing therapy with them for a couple months and they never told me. But they trusted the other worker. And so when we staff it, they're like, well, I figured they told you, so I didn't report. I'm like, I've never heard this before. So, you know, the default is to always report. And you don't have to be a mandatory reporter to report. If a child tells you something, most of them have online reporting.
Anonymous. You can be anonymous.
You can be anonymous, because what if you are the only one that knows? Because sometimes, you know, if you do have those kiddos who are eat up with the bug bites like you were talking about, or they always have bruises and those types of things. And you think, well, I mean, they're already in second or third grade, so surely one of the other teachers but that kid could be asked about it in a, how did you get that bruise? And they've been coached, because a lot of abusive families coach their children to not ever tell. If they tell, they're going to take you away from me. You'll never see me again. They say all these things to their children. So if someone does ask them, they may say, oh, I fell, or I bumped it, or me and my sibling were fighting, or, you know, they may always have an answer because they've been coached to have an answer. But if they come to you, or they say, well, you know, mommy's boyfriend did it, or mommy did it when she got mad, but you're like the fourth or fifth person that's had them in school, maybe you think, well, it's already been reported at some point. It may not have. And if you report and DHS already has a report, or Child Protective Services, they'll screen it out. They'll do a double check. They'll follow up, and then they'll screen it on out. I mean, you cannot let a child go on suffering because, oh my gosh, there's times where I've been like, man, I don't know. I know this. I've worked with this kid enough to know.
And teens are the hardest, like you said. Teens are the hardest. And that's the thing. You have teens that get mad, especially ones that are friends with ones that's been in the system.
Yes.
And they know, if I say such and such, DHS is going to come in my house and they're going to make life hell for my parents. And that's what I want right now, because they're pissing me off. And I want to go live with my boyfriend, even though I'm just 15.
Right.
Because that's one of the biggest ones. My 20-year-old boyfriend wants me to come live with him, and my parents won't let me for some reason. And so I'm going to report them. But that's the thing. Those kids I've had those cases, and sometimes it makes it to a court case and it gets screened. It gets ended up dismissed. But flipping back, the bonus part of making it to a court case is you get counseling in the home for all the people.
Right.
Family counseling. When they find out, because sometimes that's what it is. Sometimes it's mental health issues for a child that lead to, I've seen some where it was not abuse, but everybody thought it was abuse because this is a younger child and they are always injured. They're always got something going on. And the parents would say they are doing it to themselves. And the people are like, I don't know, we need to investigate you. They run the investigation. And sure enough, the child has severe mental health issues.
Sure.
That need treatment. And the parents didn't know what to do.
Right.
People are not trained. Luckily, I've heard you talk about this not long ago, that mental health is making a headway in being recognized as something's wrong.
Right.
And so luckily that's to the forefront now, where people can sometimes go, okay, I think I saw a commercial about some kind of mental health issue and maybe that's what this is. But unfortunately, living in a rural area, even the pediatricians at times, I get frustrated with them because they try to just throw it off on, well, maybe they're just autistic. Let's run them through some autism tests. Or maybe they're hyper. It's hyperactivity.
Let's just put them on some meds. It'll be fine.
Rarely do you get a child's mental health referral after these people. And that's a lot of times what will save parents. And as parents, if you're having these problems, report to your pediatrician. Make sure it's getting noted in their doctor notes that you're reporting this stuff's going on. Because then when DHS steps in, you can say, listen, I've been telling their doctor for a while now. Something's wrong. Something's not right. But they don't know to seek mental health treatment for a young child.
Right.
And a lot of times that ends up closing out, but they get services they need so that they can take care of their child. Because a lot of times that's what the parents want. They just want their child to be okay. They just don't know how to make them okay.
Right. They don't know what to do. And when you're talking about, again, we are in a very rural, impoverished area of the state, mental health is not something that is talked about. And so the commercials and, there's a lot of mental health on TikTok. I'm one of them, but you can trust me. I'm saying, no, there's a lot of things that are said that I'm scrolling through and I'm like, oh, that could be, that's a little eek. But there's a lot of good things that they can find too. And if you have someone who is seeking out those resources because they don't know what to do, even I have people walk in my door because, again, I work, community mental health, and it's usually people with no income or that are on state aid or federal aid or whatever it is. And they're like, we don't know what to do. And they're the best clients because we're like, okay, let us help you. Like, we can help you. This is real. Mental health issues are real. Children can be severely mentally ill. They can be troubled children. They can have these struggles. And it can be without any other things in the home. Our brains develop how our brains want to develop. And 80-something% of mental health conditions are genetic, but it may not have been as strong. Like they may, and every mental health concern is on a spectrum. You hear about autism and the spectrum of it, but really every mental health condition is on a spectrum. You can have depression and be functioning and do the things, and you can have major depression and not be able to get out of bed. Everything is on that pendulum, and sometimes it swings, and children's brains are constantly developing and firing. And when things don't connect like they should, then you do have some kids who have some serious mental health issues that are harming themselves, that are harming their siblings, that are doing these things. And parents may not know, and they may not know to report it. And they may be taking it to some doctor who may not be the best, and they just want to put the kid on meds and, kind of change the kiddo's brain instead of saying, okay, we're going to do this because this medication may calm down some of that. And also, you need to get this kid in services. They need to be seeing someone about their behavioral health issues. We need to do some testing. There's all kinds of testing out there. And there's all kinds of testing that Sooner Care, Medicaid, Medicare, all of those things will pay for, or whatever the Arkansas's version of it. The federal aid, the federal aid, the state aids, those things will pay for psychological testing. They will pay for these assessments. You just have to find the right agency, and you may be put on a list because there's not a lot of them that do it in general, much less take the federal state aids, but there are options. And when you are struggling like that, and when you do have a kiddo who is obviously struggling and you don't know what to do, and you're talking to people and they're not helping you, keep searching to protect your child and to have them not grow up in the system where they're always in trouble and they're failing out of school and they're being a bully and they're hurting other people because they're not receiving help that they need. And again, it may be because you don't know where to get it, but there's ways to find it.
And don't be the family that is embarrassed by it.
Right.
Because you have those families that, well, if I can't handle it, I don't want everybody else knowing that I can't handle my child. Mm-hmm. Because where that leads, and what I've seen in a lot of my cases, is you end up with a teenager that is threatening a family member to the point law enforcement gets involved.
Sure.
And then it's like, oh, this child needs help. Mm-hmm. Well, this child's needed help for years.
Right.
The parents just kind of, until the school said, we're fixing to kick this kid out
Mm-hmm.
because they won't behave, that's when they finally did something. Or law enforcement gets involved.
Right.
Or seek help first so that you don't end up in a case for neglect, because medical neglect is also a neglect. Mm-hmm. And mental health can be found to be a medical neglect. If you are not getting a child the care it needs, and you know it needs it, mm-hmm. you are neglecting that child.
Right.
And that can be a DHS case.
And it should be, because again, you're raising someone who is not going to be able to function in society. There are very few mental health concerns that cannot be addressed, that cannot make someone functioning in society. I mean, you have some severe mental illness, like severe schizophrenia, that maybe the meds help, but their baseline is a 5 or a 6. They're not ever going to be a 10. And that's okay, because they can find a place in the world, they can function, they may not can work, but they can function, they can take care of themselves as long as we keep them in treatment and on their medications. They're okay. And you can have some kiddos who are struggling that much too, but almost everything is treatable and or manageable, or both. And so it may be that concern of, it is embarrassing because my kid is always in trouble and we can't go places because they act out and they scream and yell and they do all these things. And you have a parent who may truly be trying and they don't know what to do, but they don't do anything because we didn't act like that. And the grandparents or the other family members are saying, you need to control your kid. We didn't act like that. We didn't grow up in a family like that. And there's all this judgment and shame and all of those things that come with seeking services. But yet, if not, you're raising a felon. I mean, essentially, like it's not going to end well for this human.
Because, I mean, the harming small animals really is a sign of trouble.
Very much
and
so.
I've had one of those clients where and sadly, he'll probably spend the majority of his life, and when he transitions to adulthood, probably go into another facility because he is so mentally disturbed. He cannot function in society.
Right.
But there are places he can function, and it's not like the old days where, they stuck him in a what do they call those things?
The straight jacket.
Yes.
Padded rooms.
Yes, they don't do the padded rooms. They probably still do those
There's
somewhere.
some.
But
There's a few.
They have basically villages, for lack of a better
residential living.
residential. Yes, where it's not as ostracized as it was back when they were drilling into their brains trying to fix them.
Sure.
But if you don't get that help, a lot of these parents will carry guilt when they do harm someone else.
Yes.
Because they think, well, I knew I should have done something. And that's where reporting, prevention. If you are a grandparent, and I see this more times than not, that a grandparent gets told by a child that this is happening in their home. And rather than telling someone outside the family, the grandparent talks to the parent about it, who gets pissed off.
Sure.
And then cuts the grandparent off from the child. And then the child's upset and doesn't want to tell anybody else because, well, grandma doesn't get to see me anymore because I told grandma and grandma said something to mama and mama doesn't believe it. And so, so this child's not only getting abused, they don't get to talk to their one resource anymore.
Right.
Because the grandparents don't want to get the parents in trouble. And I don't want to be cut off from the child. Well,
because I raised them and, that's my kid and they're acting like that.
So if your grandchild reports abuse to you, talk to your child about it, whatever. Report it to someone else too.
Yes.
Anonymously. The hotlines are, I'm not going to lie about it. Calling the hotline's a nightmare. You're on hold forever.
Yeah.
But you do not have to give your name. You can tell that the child told you. You can tell what you've witnessed. I know a lot of neighbors that have, for lack of a better, it's a very horrible term, crackheads, but the meth house.
It is what
they
it
have
is.
the meth house in their neighborhood, and they know if the meth house finds out that I did that, they're going to not only steal all my crap out of my house while I'm gone, they're going to retaliate.
Yeah.
They're going to retaliate. And there's a lot of fear there, but those people also see those kids getting off the bus, going to those homes, and they also see those kids being left alone, like little kids,
Littles.
5 and 6 year olds left alone, nobody home, no adults there, or worse, creepy men or creepy other crackheads coming in and out. And they know mama's selling meth out of the back door. Call that in anonymously. Or if you know that's the other thing. If you know somebody in law enforcement, most of your law enforcement are very good, if you know them, to keep your name out of it.
Right.
But they can circumvent and kind of do a check and do a welfare check. And then once they see something, they're mandatory reporters. Not all of them do it.
No.
Law enforcement, step up and be a mandatory
Please.
reporter.
Yes.
I've ran into those a lot of times too,
Do your
where
job.
they know what's going on. They know they're watching mom because they want to arrest her for selling meth, but yet they don't go arrest mom for having a child in that home watching all this go down. Or they don't report it to DHS because they don't want to mess up their buys.
Right.
Don't be stupid.
Yeah.
Report it.
Report it.
Don't make these kids live through that. That was my little soapbox.
Agreed.
Um,
I co-sign.
if you're worried about reporting, report to someone you trust.
Yes.
And then let that person you trust somehow get it. It can be worked. I've had people tell me stuff, and I don't like being reported to, but I do find ways to report to other people so that it gets checked out. I'm a mandatory reporter, and if a child tells me something, again, I have to report it if it's not already in my DHS cases. But I have had things reported to me by children in DHS cases that were a whole nother allegation.
Sure.
Because a lot of times your kids in abusive homes, your even worse abuse or sexual abuse doesn't come out until they're in therapy.
Right. Until they trust somebody.
Yeah.
Until they build a rapport and they trust someone and they have someone that they can go, oh, this person actually does have my back. Like this person's not going, I'm not going to get punished for telling. I'm not going to, have any repercussions for this if I tell them this, because now things are moving and I feel like it's going to be a safer environment for me. So I want to tell, I want to get those things out. So I think that's a good point that, things may come out later. I mean, I've worked with kiddos like in that situation too, where, you've worked with them for a while and that it's not the best living environment. You're not real sure. And then months down the road, they'll just say something and you're like, oh, okay.
Let's circle back.
How often is that? How is your color in a way? How often is that happening? And they're like, oh, just about every week. And you're just like, oh, okay. Yikes.
Because again, sometimes kids don't know it's abuse.
They don't know.
They're raised in it. Mm-hmm. Especially,
it's normal.
Especially physical abuse. I mean, sexual abuse, obviously, there's a lot of behind the scenes grooming, things like that go on. Physical abuse, I just love hearing parents argue that their domestic abuse is not abuse on their child because they didn't hit their child. They only hit each other.
Right.
Domestic abuse is child abuse because your children are watching it happen. Mm-hmm. Even if it's not their father, mother, whatever, whoever you are throwing down with and your child is present, that is child abuse. With children, you have to ask the right question to get the answer. And sometimes you say, well, are you being abused? Well, no.
Right.
Because they don't know what that is.
They don't know what that is. They've seen something on TV where someone's being punched or kicked or whatever.
With a stick,
none of that's
random.
happening. And so, I mean, I'm being locked in my room every night while mommy and boyfriend or daddy and his woman, the new one, whoever it is in the relationship with whoever the actual parent is, are screaming and yelling and fighting. And I'm not sure if, their mommy or daddy is going to be alive in the morning, but that's not right. They're not hitting me. So it's fine. And so, because they don't understand, they don't know the caveats of it. And if you are in that situation where domestic violence is happening in the home, and again, maybe the kid's not getting hit, but you're also teaching that kid that that's normal, and they're going to go stay the night at somebody's house and be like, oh, mom and dad don't know, they're not throwing down every night, they're not hitting each other.
You don't throw things?
Yeah, you have things that aren't broken. Like, how does that happen? And they don't understand that that's abusive. And if that's the generational curse of the family, then they're going to be in an abusive relationship. And someday that parent is going to go, I can't believe you would be with someone like that because you saw how it happened between me and your dad, or the dad's talking, and between your dad, whoever I was with, and like you saw how bad that was. And they're like, you're right, I did. That's what I learned. That's what I learned relationships were, is abuse and talking to each other like shit and being mean and saying things or throwing things at each other's head when you get mad. Like, that's not normal. That's what you raised me in. That's how I know to relate to someone. So it is one of those things that they may not understand, and you do have to ask the questions in a kid age appropriate way, and you ask it in different ways, because again, you may say, are you being abused? And they'll go, no, because whatever they saw or heard or read abuse was, that's not happening to them. But
it's their normal.
It's their normal. Does something make you not feel so good? Like, does somebody do something to hurt you? Do you get hurt by a parent? Are they harming you in any way? Does anything ever make you just feel really bad about yourself? And they may like, yeah, when mommy or daddy or boyfriend, girlfriend, uncle, cousin, brother tells me I'm stupid all the time and they lock me in my room because I spilled something. Like, oh, okay. That sounds pretty rough. How often does that happen? And you can ask those questions in a way that you're not questioning the kiddo. You're just having a conversation about something that may be going on that makes them not feel so good. And then you can suss out whether that report needs to be made. And it's just like we said earlier, like, if there is a question at all, report it.
Exactly.
It's going to come out. Like, if you are questioning it all and you're just like, I'm just not sure. It's not your job to be sure. It's other people's jobs to be sure. It's a CPS worker. It's the protective services. It's the DHS, the child advocates, whoever it is that's doing those interviews. It's their job. It's just like when someone is suicidal and I'm doing the evaluation, I'm like, man, I don't know. I send them inpatient because that's the people
Better
that work
safe than sorry.
inpatient are the ones who deal with this all the time, and they know what to look for. They know what to ask, and they know the things to do. And I don't want to be like, I don't think they're really telling me they're suicidal. They're saying that they're not, but then they had this behavior. So I'm just going to let them ride it out. I've had it happen where someone completed suicide and they were my client, and it's really rough. So, just like with this, you err on the side of caution. Like, just what if this is really happening? Like, it doesn't seem right. I know the family, I know the people, or, if you're the parent or the grandparent, well, that never happened in my house. Da, 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 da. You don't know what's going on in other people's homes. I mean, it's just like with going back to domestic violence and adults, once someone's out of an abusive situation, they start telling the stories and people are like, oh my God. Or you see on the Dateline, every Dateline, 48 Hours, True Detective, whatever you're listening to, it starts with, they were such a nice guy or girl. I never imagined this would happen.
They seem like such a happy couple.
They seem like such a happy couple. Well, yeah, because that's what you present to the world.
You don't post that on Facebook.
You're not. Well, some people do.
Well, yeah, that's true.
But they're still together. They're celebrating their anniversary the next week. So, but it's one of those things, just err on the side of caution. And there are the anonymous ways to report. And if your state doesn't allow anonymity, like Laura said, find that person that you can that is a mandatory reporter, that you can say, listen, this is happening, but I cannot have my name involved. I cannot be involved in this, because if these kiddos need a place to stay, I need to be there. Or if nothing comes from it, I need to be their safe space, because I am the grandparent or the family member that the kiddo trusts, and they like to come over, and I like to be able to get them when I know mom's on one or she's using again or whatever it is. I can go get the kiddo and they can come stay with me. But if this blows up, that parent is not going to allow that. No. And so now this kiddo doesn't have a safe space. So I need to not be involved in this, but I know this is happening and I need it investigated. So you find that person that can report it. You find the agency that will help you out, because there's agencies for that. There's people out there that can help you get the kiddos the help they need. You don't have to be involved. I mean, we have for Adult Protective Services in Oklahoma, you can go online, and I'm pretty sure CPS, the children's side of that, has where you can go online and report. You just fill out a form. There's always a way to get that information, even if it's just an email. Create a fake email account and send an email to a worker or someone that is.
Do something.
There's so many ways just to do something to protect those kiddos so that they don't end up in court. They don't end up being abused long term. They don't end up as adults who have terrible relationships and they're finally seeking help, and we go, oh, well, this is why. No wonder you have terrible relationships and you're not doing well in life, because what happens in our childhood definitely stays with us into adulthood, and it shapes who we are and how we act. Until it's wrong, that's where the adults in these kiddos' lives.
Just don't be afraid to report. Like you've said, do it somehow, because you've got your kids who will just stay in the shadows and know what at the school. They play it off well enough at the school that nobody knows. The teachers don't know. And that's what bothers a lot of people when it does come out sometimes, is they say, well, I should have seen it. I should have done this. I should have been able to step up and help the child, especially with family members on sexual abuse cases. Those are the worst cases. When something like that happens and they're like, well, I should have known. They should have known, they could tell me. You cannot play the blame game if you had no clue. All you can do is be there for that child from here on out. And I've seen families fall apart when the case does go to DHS court and you have grandparents step up and say, okay, we'll take them. And the case requires that the parents cannot come over to your house and see the kids. They have to see them through DHS. Those parents get mad at the people trying to help the kids, but most of the time, grandparents will choose their grandchildren over their kids because their kids are on meth and they know it.
Right.
And they may not have been the ones that stepped up and did anything about it. But now that it's happened, they're like, all right, I'm going to be there for my grandkids, and you're going to get clean or you're going to get out.
Right. And those grandparents could have been on meth while they were raising their children.
Could have been.
They could have, because the kids, and I've said it before, most of the time the kids grandparents are different people than they were when they're parents. And, they may have been shitty parents, and they may have been on drugs, and they may have lived that life. And these people may be able to point the finger and be like, well, this is how you raised me. Maybe so, but now I know that's wrong. And I'm not going to let my grandchildren grow up like that. So they will step up and piss off the parents and say, I'm taking these kids. You can either get right or get left. Like we ain't doing this. They're not going to grow up like you did, because I know what I did to you and I know how I raised you, and I'm not going to let my grandkids grow up like that, because that happens a lot too. You see families that do get older and they understand the impact they had on their own children, and they may be different people and say, I can step in and help this kid.
And that's and there's another way, like as far as the preventative, there are ways that don't involve DHS, like guardianships. If you're a grandparent and you know that your grandchild's being abused and that the parents are on meth, or because that's, like I said, one of the most common. But if you know and you can have proof to go to court, you can hire an attorney and go to court and tell the court that you need this guardianship of this grandchild because this is going on in the home. And if you can show that in court, the court can grant guardianship without DHS even being involved. They can order parents to take drug tests. They can order them to do different things to show it's happening. And if they grant that guardianship, there's a checklist of things the parents have to complete before they can get those kids back. And it's just a civil way, as far as like the type of court. It's just a civil way to do it versus involving DHS or Child Protective Services or whoever.
And I think you probably see cases too where the parents who are on drugs, who are in that cycle, who know they're not doing right, are okay with that.
Yes.
They say, please take my kids. Like, because I know I'm not living right and I may not ever live right. But if you'll take them, then I'll agree to it and maybe they can have a better life.
Yeah. And that happens a lot. And a lot of times it's one of those, sometimes it's coming down to DHS tells them either you're going to give your parents guardianship or we're going to have to get involved to take the kids out of your home. A lot of times the cases won't come up until they've ditched them with the grandparents for a year.
Right.
And now the child needs to be enrolled in school or needs to be treated for something medical and the grandparents can't do it because they're not the parents. Can be agreed to, and all the parents have to do is consent. And then once they straighten up, they can petition the court to get their kids back.
Right.
And that happens too. Parents, like you said, they just need time to figure their life out and not drag their kids through it while they do it.
Yes, that part.
Don't drag your kids through it.
Don't drag your kids through any of it. Get yourselves together and stop dragging your kids. Stop using your kids for go-betweens. Unless they are teenager, an older child, because maybe you and your ex cannot get along. Maybe you cannot have civil conversations, which grow up and have civil. Just talk about the kids. Maybe you can't talk about anything else. Maybe they're a terrible human and all you do is fight. But you need to be able to talk about your kiddo or have someone, a mediator. But when the kids get old enough, it may be okay to say, hey, message your mom or dad and like find out if you're coming over this weekend, or see what time they're going to come get you. Like, that's okay. Like, it's fine, because the kid at that point knows that y'all can't get along and you can't be in the same place.
But at the same time, you shouldn't say, tell your dad what a piece of crap he is, or tell your mom how crappy they are, or why is she out doing this? Because I saw her here the other day. And you can't do that. And a lot of your divorce cases now, we put language in there that says you're not to use your child as a go-between. Not that people follow that anyway, but you're gonna have those stupid people that just insist on, don't tell your kids what's going on in either parent's life. Don't be that person that's like, well, your mama or daddy is screwing on so-and-so and they've been out at the bar every weekend and blah, blah. Right. Your kid don't need to know that. No matter how old they are, they don't need to know it.
Ever. Because if the other parent is a piece of shit, the kid is going to figure that out.
Yes.
Like, if they are neglectful and doing these things and a terrible person, the kid will figure that out on their own. You saying it now just makes the kid mad at you, because even the shittiest parent is still their parent and they may be aware, but they don't want you saying it. So let the kid figure it out. You let them go to visitations. It may not be the best situation for them. Maybe that parent's not super involved. Maybe they do have a new partner who spends more time with the kid or engages with the kiddo more than the actual parent does when they're there. At least the kiddo's getting engaged. At least they're there. That parent is there. They're getting that time with them. And eventually, if they're a crappy enough parent, they will go away on their own. And then you talk to the kiddo about how it's not their fault. And you get them the help they need to understand why mommy or daddy abandoned them, why they have left. But you aren't the person that says, well, they left you because they had to run off. That it's more important for them to use drugs. It's more important for them to be with so-and-so than it is for them to be with you. No, stop it. Just stop. Because the kid, again, doesn't need to know that.
No.
They don't have the brain development to understand that somehow it's not their fault. So they're going to make it their fault. It's going to be, again, those I'm unlovable, I'm unworthy, I'm not good enough, or my parent would want me. My parent would stop using drugs. My parent wouldn't beat me. They don't understand that the adults in their lives are just bad people. So we don't blame the kid. We don't use the kid. We don't manage the kid. We don't tell them what to say. We're not making them feel bad for having a good time at the other parent's house if they're going for visitations, any of those things, because that is, it's not going to be probably considered child abuse in the world of what, CPS or DHS would be involved in, but it is abusive to your child to do that. It creates mental health issues. It creates relationship issues. It creates all of these additional problems they're going to have in adulthood because you're just mad. You're mad that your relationship didn't work out, or you're mad about what they did to you. But maybe they're a good parent. I have a friend who the relationship was terrible. He was a terrible human to her in the relationship, but he is a great father. Like, he does everything for the kid, and they co-parent well. They don't talk about anything else but the kiddo, but they co-parent well. They have great communication when it comes to the kid. They don't talk about anything else. Nothing else is ever brought up. They are on the same page when it comes to the kiddo, and he is a great dad. But he was a terrible husband, and he was terrible in the home together. They just didn't mesh in the end. But now they can co-parent perfectly. And, people see their relationship. Well, why don't y'all, because they go to things together in places. And they said, they can all, him with his new partner and her with her new partner, they all hang out together, at events and things. But they don't talk. They're not having conversations, but they can be in the same room.
They can be present.
They can co-parent together. They cannot show their asses in front of the kid. And it's just a great relationship to have, because that's what it should be. That's what the kids should see, because it's about the kiddo. It's not about you. I don't care what happened in your relationship. It's not about you. It's about the kiddo. And you need to just suck it up, and you show up, and you don't show your ass, and you don't talk about the other parent. And that's how we can prevent some of those things that create unhealthy adults that may perpetrate the pattern of abuse or domestic violence or whatever it is, it may not have been great at one point, but we can be okay now. And I think that's the way that we can help the kiddos. And again, going back to just, circling back around, report, when in doubt.
When it's an actual, so on the divorce front, obviously, if you think your child is being abused and they come home every time with bruises across the back of their legs, their shape, you can read what kind of belt it was.
Right.
Or they've got,
fingers.
They've got fingerprints, or they're obviously you can look at that child and go, okay, this is abuse. I had my two youngest boys when they were little. I always joked that if anyone ever examined them, they would think we were beating them, because they played hard and they played rough, and they would have little bitty handprints where they were grabbing each other, wrestling when we weren't catching them because they knew better. They were bruised. There is a difference between a bruised knee, where obviously the child is learning to walk and fell and hit their knee, or they bonk their little heads,
fell off a bicycle,
all those things. Don't be the parent that calls those in.
No.
Don't be the parent that the other parent says, when you go to pick them up, they say, hey, just want you to know they fell off their bike while they were over here. Yeah, they've got a bruise, nothing big. We kept an eye on it. It's all good. Don't call that in.
Right.
Because I have those cases where I've got parents that call and report on the other one, trying to get them in trouble so they can get custody.
Right.
That's not the way to do it. But if you feel like your child's being abused, do report that. And then they will check it out. And if the child is reporting that it's abuse, it will be screened as abuse. And then the courts, again, DHS doesn't have to get involved in that. The custody courts can say, all right, looks like there's some abuse going on over here. Until we figure out what's going on, you're going to have supervised visits or whatever.
Right.
Don't false report, though.
No.
I have a couple of cases where the parents, I don't know how they got through the hotline so many times, because they, every time there was a visit,
their number.
every time there was a visit, it was reporting. And then they would interview the child. I would meet with the child. Nothing's going on. It was always something normal, like some average,
plausible,
not coached
child.
You're
Yes.
going to know, because I know coached children. I've had some that was pointed to in a custody case. Walked up, first time I ever met them, and they're like, "Daddy slapped me across the face." Okay, I just met you, child.
Right.
And that goes with what you said about therapists and building rapport. A child with no rapport that reports that easily, something's going on.
Yes.
You got to dig a little deeper on that one, because most children at those ages, they don't just come out and say something like that to
No.
somebody they just met.
No, they do not.
And a lot of times with my child abuse cases in the DHS realm, when they start therapy is when it comes out that this was truly a pattern of abuse.
Right.
Because like you said, children don't, unless it's the right question, they don't give you that answer. I'll ask a lot of times, what do you get in trouble for?
Yeah.
Because I'm always curious as to what,
Sure.
what do they get in trouble for? Especially in custody cases, because sometimes you get the new boyfriend, girlfriend, step parent, whatever, that's extreme, and the child is literally getting in trouble for,
Breathing.
jumping
Yeah.
jumping up and down in the room.
Being loud.
Yeah, being loud. They're not used to a child that age, and if they're, 4 or 5, preschool, school age, they're kind of obnoxious. And if you're not used to having one of those around, they
Right.
can get in trouble a lot. And then that's where, like you said, the wanting to people please. A lot of times kids will tell me, well, I got a whipping, but I was being bad. Well, what were you doing to be bad? And sometimes it's like, yeah, you probably needed that.
You going to baby's kids.
Yeah. But sometimes it's like, oh, really? Do you get in trouble for that all the time? And it's something minor.
I spilled something.
Yeah,
or I
something
dropped something. Just
accidental.
normal
Yeah.
kid things.
Now, a lot of sometimes it's back talking.
Sure.
I get a lot of the back talking from teenagers, especially. That's where you field it out and you see, does this require reporting? Because sometimes they don't like what was cooked for dinner. Like,
Right.
I hate going over there. Oh, really? Well, what's going on? Is it bad? Do you get in trouble? And they'll tip their talk all around, and then it comes down to, well, they make me eat my dinner.
Yeah.
Oh,
They won't let
really?
me have my iPad in bed.
Yeah. It's like you go,
They take my
okay.
phone away at night.
And to them, especially your elementary kids, that's horrible. That makes them a horrible
terrible.
person. They won't. I had
How
one
dare
the other
they?
day that was, they won't let me play with my stepbrother's toys. He got brand new toys for his birthday, and they wouldn't let him immediately play with
Sure.
them. And that was why it was horrible, terrible. And I'm like, well, that is pretty bad. But and then we go
bless
through
you.
the whole talk about. That's their new stuff. And do you get to play with the other toys? Well, yeah, I've got toys, and so it's not that they're being
They have
having
no
to sit there with a
toys.
stick.
The stepbrother has toys and they have no toys.
They're not given 2 sticks and a rock. Like, it's just to them though. It's terrible. And that's where a lot of times school is such a good resource because the teachers know the kids and they see them daily, and they know if they're having to, bring clothes for them to wear, or luckily a lot of the schools now have laundry where they can take those kids and wash their clothes. And so they're not the stinky kids in school. And I know you and Jay, I think, talked about that.
Yeah.
But that is coming from that neglect at home. And most of the time those teachers do report.
Sure.
Because it's not normal. And even if it is, sometimes you'll have families that are on a lower learning scale. And maybe they didn't even complete high school, but that was their family norm. And so they don't know these are basic laundry skills.
You have to take a bath.
Yeah. And if that comes into DHS, there's CHUBS, which don't ask me what it stands for because I cannot remember. But it is actual parenting class for when these parents get their house cleaned up and they've got themselves, clean. If it's not, or if they're stopped using drugs. But most of the time, there's some that aren't drug related. They're just
they're just
dirty homes.
Yeah.
They get to a level where, okay, the home is now safe. It's a parenting program that actually comes in the home with the kids, and they observe and they tell the parents, okay, it's not okay. Let your kid do this, or it is okay.
Right.
And then this is how you teach your kids to help you clean up. And they teach them how to do laundry, and they teach them this is how to buy groceries, and they go through the whole thing. And sometimes the parents succeed. I've seen some that are just so far gone, they don't, and the kids may get removed again. Most of the time, those are fairly successful because the parents learn, okay, there is another way.
Right.
Just because I was raised this way, this is how we can do things, and everybody can be okay.
Because there is a lot of that learned behavior. They don't know that you are supposed to do laundry all the time. They don't know that you're supposed to take a shower. Hygiene is not something that's really taught in schools anymore. I don't think they may get a little, but I don't know that they get the classes and things. And they may not understand that you need to bathe and, at least get your bits, like,
some deodorant
bits and
helps.
bits, let's just buy some wipes if you don't, maybe the water gets turned off all the time. So, they just need to know to buy some wipes and to do these things, but they don't understand that because they didn't grow up that way. Like they were just, the family didn't shower and they didn't have these things. And so, programs like that are great. And that's where, schools can be involved and just reporting and talking to the kiddo like, hey, do you are you taking baths? Are you cleaning up? Do you have water? Those types of things. And that may just be a call to the parent and talking to the parent about it and then learning, the water got turned off because I got laid off and I couldn't do this, or it was, it went up. And so I could only pay part of my bill. And there's, programs for that too. So it's that resource of reaching out and that prevention before we get to the point where kids are being removed, where we are having to worry about, worse things happening in the home.
And and again, that's like age-based a lot of it, because
Sure.
I've had teenage boys that didn't want to shower.
Right.
And we still made them
Yes.
against their will. They probably would have told someone they were being abused because they were being made to shower. But there's a difference between that kind of hygiene and you've got little elementary kids that just smell horribly and all the kids are making fun of them because they don't know any better. And even like y'all said, even if it's not a making fun of in a blatant way, it's, ooh, you smell funny.
Yeah.
Like,
Why are you smelling
and
that?
the kids get all embarrassed and it's not their fault. It's
Right.
just the parents. I don't know. Truancy is a big red flag. Luckily, that's something that gets people looking into the homes, especially on little ones. Teenagers, again, there's parents that send them to school and then find out later they're not in class. But with little ones, when they're late or they're absent all the time and they're showing up not clean or they're starving to death when they get to school.
Or they're sleeping.
Yeah, they're
If
sleeping in class
sleeping in
because they're not
class,
sleeping at home. Yeah.
These are all signs that things are not okay at home because, and I've heard of, and schools I think are getting better, but there's schools that punish the little ones for being late. And I'm like, somebody
their
brought
fault.
them there. Like, what are we doing here? Because they didn't drive themselves. It's not like the teenager who stopped through the drive-through and now they're late for school,
Or at the donut shop.
or at the donut shop, or they're doing these things, or they just aren't. They're telling their parent they're showing up and they're parking and maybe leaving their phone there because they do have Life 360 or some tracking app, and then they're dipping out, but their phone may be there, which most teenagers won't leave their phones anywhere. But if they know a parent may be watching, they might just to go do hood rat things and, try to not get in trouble for that. But the school's reporting, they're like, no, my kid is there. I'm looking at their phone. And they're like, well, their phone may be here, but your kid ain't. So, but if they're the littles, if they're those younger kiddos who maybe aren't getting put on the school bus and they're depending on a parent to get them there and they're late, that is not the kid's fault. If they're coming to school and they're sleeping in class, it's probably not their fault. If they're starving when they get there and they're stealing food or they're sneaking food or they're doing these things, that is not a kid's fault. Like there's something going on that you need to look into. And that is where that prevention comes in, because maybe it did just start. Maybe something did just happen in the home and you never saw this from this kiddo before and you've had a behavior change. That's a sign of abuse. If we have, a kid who was doing great in school and now they may be in the teenage world, but now their grades have fallen off and they're starting to be truant and they're starting all these behaviors. Don't just chalk that up to, oh, they're just a kid being a kid. Like something has probably happened in that kiddo's life that we need to investigate and we need to look into, and you need to talk to that kiddo about without blame or shame or guilt. Like, hey, what's going on? Like, I've noticed that you're coming in a little later and your grades, you're just not paying as much attention. Is there anything you want to talk about? And each school has a counselor and they may not be an actual counselor. They may have that title. They may not be great at it, but there may be a teacher that kid trust.
Yeah.
And that's who has that conversation with them, because maybe you noticed it, but you don't know this kiddo and you just had them in their room, but you know that they have worked well with this other teacher and they got along with them. Like you can go to that other teacher and say, hey, I've noticed this. Is this, can you talk to this kiddo? And and or just report it and let it all come out in the wash. So it is about being the voice for someone who may not know they need a voice, and someone who may have been told to not have a voice, and someone who may not understand to use their voice.
Yeah, and your kids, kids can get involved in drugs too. And I've had horrible cases where the parent thought it was okay to do meth with their child that was in high school. And luckily the school reported because the child was acting odd and up and missing class, got the ball rolling. Investigation shows this is going on. Well, the child's not going to report.
No.
Child's partying and doing drugs and drinking and staying up and all the things. But luckily the system worked in that case to where child was caught early enough that she was able to get help, because had she not stopped using, she would have been, dead or... who knows?
Who knows?
With the drugs like they are today, possibly dead.
Possibly, for sure. You don't know what's mixed in it. And, we had one that I had to report. She was giving her child marijuana gummies at night to help her sleep. And we're like, you can't do that. Well, I've been doing it for, I'm working on trying to get my kid this card. And her kid is 14 or 15. I'm working on getting her own card. But for now, I'm giving her this. And you're giving your child drugs and or a prescription that's not theirs. Either way, it's illegal.
It's not okay.
We're going to have to report this. And she got mad and called, but we're still going to report this. And she even said, because I'm like, well, because I was at work, it was one of our other therapists, and she called me and she's like, I'm reporting it. And I told her I was reporting it because we try to be very transparent. And I was like, well, did the therapist disclose what we have to report? And she's like, well, yeah, she told me that y'all have to report, harm to self or others, or harm to a child, or any of those things. She told me that she had to report that, but this isn't that. And we're like, it is though, because not only are you giving your child a prescription that's not theirs, you're giving her drugs, depending on which way you want to look at it. Either way, this child does not need this level of THC. They do not need medical marijuana. They do not get some melatonin. Damn, there's other steps options before we get to this point. And so she was big mad, but we had to report that.
It's a medical neglect.
It's medical neglect. You can't give your child Xanax. You can't give them meth. You can't, in Oklahoma, we have the host laws or whatever when it comes to alcohol. Don't give your kid alcohol either. It's on a regular basis. Do not give your child anything that's going to alter their brain chemistry. No nicotine. Don't let your high school kid dip. Don't let them vape. Don't let them do any of those things. It's neglect. You need to get on top of that. I know it's not always manageable with teenagers. Lord knows they're going to find a way. We did. They will. It's part of growing up.
Well,
but if
you did. Not me.
Oh, yes, you were perfect. I forget. I forget. I was the bad one. No. It's one of those things that you may go, it's part of it. And it may be. Maybe they did just experiment with something. Maybe you found marijuana. They're like, it really is the only time I've did it. And now you're drug testing your child at home. And now you're doing these things to monitor it. And it was a one-off because they've learned, or they're hiding it better. Whatever it is. But if you are giving this to your child to alter their behavior, that's abusive. Don't do that.
Don't do that.
Don't do that.
There's medication, and there's doctors, and there's people that know what to give a child.
Right.
And those are the people you should ask. And then again, going back to like we talked about earlier, if your child is not getting the treatment you feel like they need, if you're taking them to their doctor they've seen since they were birthed, and you're like, listen, this is not helping. We're not getting anywhere. We're still having these behaviors. Force them to do a referral to someone else, or just go see someone else.
Just go see someone else.
Because if they're not a type of doctor that says, okay, well, I must not be able to help, I'm going to send you here because they want the child to get help, they're not what you need.
No.
Because you know your child better than anybody else. And if you think something is wrong, just keep fighting until you get it. Don't go to the extreme side to where you're creating issues because you like taking your child to the doctor. Sure. There are those cases. That's also medical neglect.
It is also medical neglect.
But if you feel like
they're just not listening,
something's not right, the behavior's off, something's wrong, keep pushing until you get that treatment.
Yes, keep advocating, because you may not be where it's coming from, but it's coming from somewhere. So keep advocating, keep pushing, keep doing all the things, screaming from the rooftops until you find the resource or the help that is going to protect that child.
And sometimes it is mental health treatment.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And again, there's no shame in that.
Mental health is health. Part of it.
That's why it's covered by most insurance.
That's right.
Because it's
All of them now.
It's for your care.
All of them now. Covered.
Really?
All
That's
of
good.
them. They have to.
Well, that makes sense.
They should. But
Again,
they
that's
should have
a
a
big
long
step.
time ago. But
That's
it's a big step. I mean, that's only happened in the last, I'd say, 5 years that they have to cover mental health services, which is sad, but
Very.
it is what it is.
But if you do have Sooner Care or Kids or one of those, most of your mental health places take that. And then if you are low income, most of your mental health places will have a sliding scale, or not most, I take that back. There are a lot of privately owned that don't. But you can find one that has a sliding scale so that if you need help and you know you're going down that path to where if I don't do something, my kids are going to get taken away, or I'm not going to be able to take care of them like I need to, seek that help as well. Because there are resources. I mean, call the ones that don't do it, and they usually have a list of ones that do.
And the community mental health centers, every state has them. They're federally funded for a most part. They're state funded for some of the parts, and you can have no income. Like there's not a copay. You can be out of service. You can be undocumented and get services. And a lot of our undocumented individuals don't seek services. They don't reach out because they're afraid of being reported, or they're afraid of the stigma of it, or they're afraid that they can't get services. But, we have resources for undocumented individuals, especially the kids of those individuals. So, if something is going on, maybe there's abuse in the home of an undocumented individual and you're afraid to call because you're afraid someone's going to get deported, or you're afraid of all of those things, the kids are going to be protected.
Yes.
Like the adults may not be. And I'll just say that they may not be.
And sometimes they don't need to be.
But those kiddos will get the support and help and resources they need. And that's what the prevention side of it is about. And it's about the kids. Without taking care of the kiddos, we don't have good adults.
Just go out and do good.
See, look, we've talked for over an hour.
Yeah.
And you were saying it would be that long. I told you just get on a roll. And
I know. I will say, of my jobs that I do, representing kids is one of my most favorite, and the one where I actually feel like I'm doing something.
Nice.
Because adults, you can't do much with them. But
sometimes you cannot.
At least with kids, I have seen a lot of success stories. Sometimes they end up in adoption with other people.
Sure.
Sometimes you see parents that you think this is never going to go okay, and they shock the system, basically.
Yeah.
Because they do right, and their kids mean more to them than anybody knew, and they jump in there and they jump through the hoops, and anybody asks them to do something, they do it. And those are the people that end up with their kids back and thrive at it. I also have seen those that don't show up for the first court date.
Yeah, they don't care.
And they don't ever show up. So.
And that's their mental health. It has nothing to do with the kids. And, they may love their kids, but they don't love them in a way that they need to. The worst parents still, most of them, have love for their children. They're just so deep in their own mental health issues, or their own drug abuse, or their own trauma, or whatever it is, that they don't understand how to be a parent. And sometimes that's okay. We can find them somewhere else to live where they're going to be loved and grow up and be happy and be a functioning adult. Whereas if someone wouldn't have reported that, then they would be going down the same rabbit hole that their parent is,
or
and
on
just
the streets,
be on the streets, incarcerated, dead, whatever. They may not see adulthood because of the life that they've learned to live, not really chosen when you're a kid, but they've learned to live. It's just so important to be a good advocate and report.
Exactly. The prevention
of it all.
Prevent it.
Thank you all for joining us this week. Thank you, sister.
You're welcome.
It wasn't too much torture, I hope.
It wasn't too bad.
All right. Well, we'll see you next week. Bye. For my producer, Jay Lindley, I'm Leslie Ross. Thank you all for joining us. Please send any questions or comments through the website, heytherapist.com, or email help@heytherapist.com. They may be featured on the show anonymously. Hey Therapist is an SEOK radio production and is for your entertainment purposes only. Thank you for joining us. Make good choices.